Through you, Mr. Chair, the word audit sounds very technocratic and financial, and usually used in the financial world. And I've heard the word forensic being used as well. But is this this audit is really about politics and power? Is it not? Or
the nature of the audit focused on the compliance components of council statutory obligations to Māori. So in terms of that context, it was effectively a compliance audit.
Compliance again sounds very technical and resource consenty. Next question. There, I see in one of the legally privileged advisory note.
Sorry,
it's all right.
Chair, sorry.
In one of the in the legally privileged advisory notes, the council has taken for task for not knowing or being familiar with treaty principles. Would it be fair to say that those treaty principles have not been legally defined yet?
Certainly in terms of treaty principles, we have a range of statutes that speak to take into account or giving effect treaty principles.
They do.
Whether it's the Resource Management Act or... So it's the nature of the decision and the specific statutory elements around that decision. Certainly the Waitangi Tribunal, the High Courts have produced a set of principles that are used to take into account, but it's very much dependent on the type of decision council's making and the specific statutory elements around that decision.
I think it would be unfair to criticise the council for not being aware of treaty principles when there's still debate about what those principles are. My last question, and that relates to the Maori responsiveness framework, and I think there's two elements here. There is the Treaty of Waitangi and the still undefined treaty principles, but there is also the aspirational goals of the Auckland plan and the uplift Maori well-being and achieve better outcomes with Maori is part of our plan. It didn't come out of the Treaty of Waitangi. So I make that point. But could I ask you, in terms of the Maori response, the two things are getting blurred. I think it's important that we keep the constitutional question separate from our obligations to achieve well-being for Maori and all our community. But the final question is, could you tell us a little about Te Toa Takatini?
Te Toa Takatini is a key program of action that is led by Stephen Town. It's a family, council family approach. It includes the CCOs and departments. It's a direct outcome of the KPMG report, which one of the key recommendations was for council to adopt a top-down approach in being able to fulfil its obligations to Māori as well as contribute to Māori wellbeing. So it's a program that we've put in place over the last 12 months. And the other key aspect of that centred around decisions, budgetary decisions through the long-term plan around Māori transformational activity and co-governance activity. So that's a direct outcome of being able to bring that together across the family.
It's an interesting name because it means many warriors, does it not?
Certainly the underpinning proverbial saying really at the heart of that is success isn't determined by the actions of one, it's actually the sum of the contribution of many. So it's really about
many warriors.
Well, many champions, if you like.
No, Toa means warrior, does it not? Or fighter?
Oh, that's one term, but it also means success and champions. So
just one more question. Could we have some, given our, the Independent Maori Statutory Board does have a role to audit us. It's in the Act. But we have statutory obligations ourselves in terms of public money. Could we have some transparency of the costs of these audits, which are put on our rates bills. So could we have a breakdown or a total of the costs of these audits? Who's getting what? Thank you.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman, that's in the funding agreement.
Right, I'm just going to bring everyone's attention. The staff are quite happy with a slight amendment to this recommendation. So you can see we've taken out where it says request a report setting out the specific actions in a 3-year treaty audit response. We're suggesting that setting out a detailed annual work program in response to the treaty audit. Still has October in there. If people are happy with that, and I'm meaning unanimously happy, I would like to move that into the main body of the recommendation and not have it as an amendment. People happy with that?
Annual's fine. Yep.
We're happy with that, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
so I'm going to put that in there, and I'm taking no more speakers, and I'm going to move all the recommendations. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Thank you.
What about my
Have lunch.
amendment? What about my amendment?
It was moved.
You forgot about it.
The local board.
He
Come
put it
on,
into
you
it.
tucked it
No,
already
I
up
didn't
there.
get reminded. Okay, well, what do we do in this situation? I wasn't reminded of Councillor Wood's amendment.
Well, you
Oh,
said you'd
don't
come
blame
back
our
to it.
staff, come on.
You said you'd come back to it. You can't do that.
Mr Chairman, I took from your words that you were incorporating this as you had incorporated
Yep.
the other,
I
and
d-
we voted on them all in an inclusive way.
Yes, that's why it was unanimous. Yes. So I'm going to reopen, go back to Councillor Wood's amendment. Do you want to speak to your amendment, George?
Well, it's quite simple. I mean, we say that we're Auckland Council is one body, which is the governing body and the 21 local boards. To have a report come to us here and say, oh, look, this report and its composition, we haven't been to the local boards, I think it's just going against the principles of that we stand for as a body. So, I mean, I actually haven't seen a report which says of this magnitude, which kind of goes around the sides of the issue in relation to going to the local boards, because this is the work program. It's the work program on the response to this this audit, and the local boards have got as much interest in this as the governing body, and right through council. So you know, I think that it should go to the local boards if we follow the proper practice before we make a decision. It comes back to us, and we know what the views of the local boards are. Thank you.
We just have a little bit of enlightenment on this, Councillor Wood, so if we'll just let Phil, could you just please speak to this, because we don't want to have a contradiction here.
I'm not sure about enlightenment. That's a heavy burden, Mr. Chair. Look, first point, the amendment is obviously in direct conflict with the first part of the resolution, which seeks to endorse this. So you cannot simultaneously endorse the work program and send it back to the local boards. It has to be one or the other. Now, I don't want the committee to misunderstand the process here. There is ongoing work with the local boards. They are engaged in a number of areas within the work program. The work program entails, for example, this question of relationship agreements at a local level. And I could go on. And so there is engagement with local boards around, has been and will continue to be, around the specific actions within the work program. Whether that's enough is for the committee to decide.
Councillor Wood, are you happy?
Look, I mentioned this right at the start of this item. When I asked a question, I raised the issue of this should be referred to the local board. So it's not as if I'm a Johnny-come-lately here. I was bringing it forward to, as an issue right up front, and I didn't, and it was seconded straight off. So I still think that this should have been voted on, and I think that to
Vote on it. We'll still
okay,
vote.
well, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to, we do have a process in place to engage with the local boards. At the quarterly statutory board meeting with the governing board, the process is to work out more of an agreement at the governing board level and then take that to the local boards. Ultimately, the local boards' relationships will be specifically and at first with the mana whenua iwi groups who are broken out and have, under the settlement legislation, rights to engage because they are the mana whenua groups. Okay, but there has to be a flow down process because, as we expressed, as was expressed at that meeting with the CEO, there are financial impacts in the event that you go out on this process on a governing board mandated approach. We haven't worked that through. And so we ended our meeting on the basis of an acknowledgement that Mr. Freeman can have a say about that, but the agreement that we agreed, or I thought that we'd agreed to agree on, was that the governing board and ourselves would work on some form of arrangement by way of a agreement, which could then be, and it's permissive, it's aspirational and values driven, as opposed to being prescriptive. Now, the local boards then, on a as and when needed basis, example, if a right of first refusal come up in their particular area, could have that conversation with that mana whenua group. So there's a lot. I accept there's a lot more work to be done, but I think I understand the intent of Councillor Wood's amendment, but I think that it's out of sequence in regard to the work processes that we're trying to tune out here. And I accept that Rome wasn't built in a day, and this is a very gritty piece of work.
Well, I'm actually going to put this amendment, and I'll just make it aware. Okay, but it's there, and we're going to vote on it. And just say be aware.
Order, Mr. Chair.
Yep, point of order.
I just wonder if we could just clarify procedurally where we are here. Did what we just moved that wasn't was that an amendment, or was that just did it end up just being a motion? Because we clearly can't vote a negative now, having just made a decision. But if that was just the substantive motion that got passed, then shouldn't have Councillor Wood's amendment should have been taken first. I'm just trying to figure out procedurally where we are. That's all.
In effect, if we, I'm just trying to get some advice here, is given that we did rush into it, can that kind of be almost deferred for this to become a replacement motion? Because if we vote on this, in effect, that will kill off all the rest of the other recommendations, and it'll be a lot more time before we come back to getting.
Well, that may be a good idea.
Mr. Chairman,
point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, excuse me.
Point of order.
Thank you.
Standing Order 310.12, direct negative is not allowed. We've already voted on it. It is a direct negative, so
okay, but I can see the mood around the room, so I'm happy to move that we revoke the previous resolutions A to I in the end. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Lee. Okay, so all those in favour?
Aye.
By division. It has to be by division. You've got to get 75%, so it have to be by division. But
We
I
do
don't
have to
think
get
I
75.
don't think it
The meeting's not over.
Okay, well, let us have a show of hands on it then.
What are we voting on?
The meeting's not
To
over. You
revoke
can
the-
revoke in the
voting,
meeting.
so we can
Revoke
actually
the
consider
recommendations.
Still can't hear.
Point of order. Point of order.
Excuse me.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, let me finish, because there was an explanation required. We would be revoking the previous resolutions A to I, and we would start again, and this would then, the way this is worded, this would then become the substantive motion if this was passed as an amendment. Councillor Wood?
Point of
your
order,
point
Mr.
of
Chairman.
Councillor Wood's point of
I
order?
have a point of order. It just seems that this isn't a situation where we've already voted. I think the vote was taken in error, and so that vote shouldn't stand because of the correct way to do it now is to set that aside. You can set that aside, Mr. Chair, because of that error, and then you can take the amendment, which I think is quite legitimate. So I would ask that you do that and proceed on
The
that
advice
basis.
I'm getting here is that we have to revoke it, and we need 75% to revoke that.
Point of order, I think that, with all due respect, that advice is incorrect. The meeting isn't over. You can revisit a motion in the same meeting without having to formally revoke, can you not?
Do. No, you don't.
Section, Standing Orders 1.9.4 says that you have to get a 75% vote.
Yes.
Just to
While the
have
meeting is still going?
Right, show of hands.
Oh, I don't think
With
so.
some clarification of the...
Excuse me,
Please,
let us be quite clear. I've been told the only way we can deal with this is to revoke A to I.
Can I have some
And
clarification?
start again, and we would deal with this as an amendment.
Can I have some clarification?
Yes?
So, is this proposed to go to the local boards just for the information, or for some sort of feedback to come and inform our decision making? Because if it's just going for information, it can just be sent for information. That's what I'm not understanding here.
We are pointing out that the local boards are involved in this process, and we'll get Phil to remind everyone of that process.
Okay, I accept that advice, but in response to my point of order, I accept the advice, but the point is there is another argument that the motion was invalid anyway, but I'll accept the advice.
Well, only if everybody thought that that was in there, and I didn't think it was.
I'm asking for Phil to talk, please.
You're not asking the room whether they think that.
Well, Jay, again, I can just reiterate that local boards will be involved in the specific action areas.
That's not the argument we've got
That's not
now,
the
though.
argument.
The argument now is where does this invalid resolution that's been passed stand in the whole scheme of things?
It's not invalid at the moment, but we can
Well,
revoke it, so we just need 75%.
Mr. Chair, a
of
point
the-
of order there on that. When I mentioned it, it was put down there in writing, and it came up on the screen. You asked for a seconder. That was seconded by Councillor Fletcher. So at that point, I believe it was live and on the floor, ready for debate. And it was. Mr. Tamahiri said, I'll come back to that and I'll have the answers. So, you know, and then all of a sudden, bingo, the motion was passed, and, you know, that was the original motion. So we're in a bit of a difficult situation here, and I think you'll have to make a pretty hard decision, which is fair to me and the other councillors.
Councillor Wood, we have a mover and we have a seconder to revoke the original resolutions. If 75% are happy with that, we will then discuss your amendment and we will start again.
Right, show of hands.
You are achieving what you wanted.
Okay.
Show of hands.
Just
It's going to do it by division.
It's going to
By
do it
division.
by a show of hands.
By division.
Okay, by division, all right then. Okay, been asked for.
Councillor Nye?
No.
Councillor Brewer?
Or?
Councillor Casey?
No.
Councillor Cashmore?
No.
Councillor Clow?
No.
Councillor Cooper?
No.
Councillor Darby?
No.
Councillor Fletcher?
For.
Deputy Mayor Hoss?
No.
Councillor Lee?
Aye.
Councillor Penrose?
Yes.
Councillor Quacks?
Yes.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes.
Member Taipari?
No.
Member Tamahiri? Councillor Sir John Walker?
Yes.
Councillor Wayne Walker?
No.
Councillor Watson?
Yes.
Councillor Wood?
Yes.
This is to revoke it. Sorry, I meant yes, Mr Chair,
Oh, yeah.
to revoke it.
Oh, help.
Whichever way it's up the mustard, it's not 75%. So the previous resolutions stand. And I will say, Councillor Wood, I apologise for not dealing with that appropriately. However, I think you've had enough comfort to know from the staff that the local boards are being consulted, and the fact is we will be on track to deliver the reports back by October.
Mr. Chairman, I had my hand up right the way through to actually try and take a call on this, because I was trying to understand before you took the vote on how this would fit, and the information that we then had from Mr. Wilson. If we set aside all the technical detail in here, I understand this body of work is about creating that sense of whānau to absolutely have the issues being put before us that we understand, rather than just pages coming backwards and forwards, that we actually are coming from a point of first principles in trying to achieve these objectives. And why I wanted to see the local boards not just being informed, but actually part of what we're trying to do and engaged. And therefore I feel, I don't feel any comfort in the advice I've had from Mr. Wilson in light of what has actually happened procedurally in this debate, that I need to know that they are going to have the same opportunity as we've had the opportunity of understanding, you know, unless we understand what we're trying to do, we won't achieve it. And I think that this is, it's all become a little bit perfunctory. And I agree with members of the Independence members on what they said at the beginning. I would like to see this having a little more integrity, and I'm going away from the meeting today really a little bit unclear about what's going to happen.